Hey everyone, today we're going to be taking a casual look at Virtual On for the Sega Saturn. Now, Virtual On was a mid-90s arcade game by Sega. It was a pretty impressive game when it came out, featuring this really big hulking cabinet with these twin sticks. The controls were very unique for the time in that you used basically two joysticks instead of just your typical joystick or your buttons or the typical steering wheel of the day. And Virtual On was just a very cool game when it came out. It was very impressive. And it actually got a pretty solid port to the Sega Saturn, despite the Saturn being, I believe, a lot less powerful than the arcade hardware that this game was using. I think this game used the Model 1 hardware. I'll put a correction below in the editing process if that's wrong. But needless to say, the arcade version definitely has a lot more going on in the game. It looks more impressive, but the general core gameplay and the overall basic graphical style really translated well to the Sega Saturn, and it is still today, in my opinion, a phenomenal Sega Saturn game, and really a must-have if you're into versus style of games, kind of like fighting games and whatnot. This is not a straight fighting game because while it is a versus game and your goal is to defeat your opponent, it's not set up exactly like a fighting game. It's like a fighting game, but it's not. I guess that's the best way I can put it. But here we are in the options menu. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure things are set. And you got basic time settings. Deathmatch is no time, essentially. You can do match count up to 5. You can do easy, normal, hard, your typical stuff. Quick and normal here on the machine select and continue basically says, do you want to see the intros and so forth for the characters when you pick your character, or do you want to just go straight into the match? And so that's what those are. And you got your basic other options, and that's basically it. For versus mode, you can do the split screen, and you can either split it down the middle, or you can split it in the center going horizontally, so you can figure out which one you like best there, which that's pretty cool that they had that option there, especially back in the mid-90s. You didn't see that too often. And that's basically it. You've got versus mode, which I don't have a controller plugged in, so I can't go to that. And then you got arcade mode, which is basically what it says. It's kind of like the arcade version of Virtual On if you were just playing by yourself in single-player mode. And now, just like any Sega fighting game, you'd get into the main screen here and you can pick which character you want to have a go with. And there's quite a few characters in this game. Well, I guess I shouldn't say quite a few. Technically, there's only 8. But each character is actually vastly different from one another in terms of like running speed, attack power, actual attacks they do, things like that. So when you play this game, try out a bunch of different characters. Some are really hulking beasts that are really slow, but they're mega powerful with like straight insta-beam lasers. Others are faster, like this character here, and they do less damage, but again, they're more agile and more mobile. So if you try this game out, just try a bunch of different characters, try to get a feel with someone, and then, just go to town. So anyway, like I was saying, Virtual On is a one-on-one. It's a versus kind of game, and when you start off, you can use the D-pad to move around, and you can use the triggers to actually turn left and right. You've got a dash function by pressing B, and you've got jumps by pressing X or Z. Z and X both jump. It doesn't matter which one you use. Now, you've also got 3 kinds of attacks. You've got your A, which for this character is a bomb, and Y is the middle attack for this character. You can see your attacks denoted by the little blue bars in the middle of the screen, and then C is your right attack, which for this guy is a shotgun apparently. You can also do a couple things, like if you hold both triggers together and press a fire or press an attack, you can actually duck behind objects and your character will shoot over them, which is very cool. So there's a little bit of sort of tactics involved here, and you've got a bunch of different maneuvers that you can use to your disposal, including jumping, doing a fake jump where you can jump up and then go immediately to the ground like that. Now, the biggest function used in this game is easily the dash function, which you tap or you activate by pressing B. Now, you actually have to hold in a direction and dash, but the big thing with it is once you dash and you press a fire key, doesn't matter which fire or attack it is, your character will automatically lock on to the opponent. So if any of that kind of made sense to you, I'll go ahead and play a full match without really explaining anything. You can kind of see what's going on in this game. Now, as long as your attacks are highlighted in blue and they're not red, you can use them. So you can keep bouncing between different attacks and so forth. And that's really a big part of this game, is sort of managing your attacks. You don't want to always keep mashing the shotgun because it's going to run out of ammo and you might need to use another attack. So toss out a shotgun blast and then let it charge a little bit. And while it's charging, toss out your middle attack or your bomb or something like that for this specific character. And, you know, if you were able to kind of soak all that in, if you've never played this before, guys, that's basically Virtual On in a nutshell. It's not an extremely complicated game, but once you start getting into the versus mode and you start really just going to town and, you know, getting into some intense matches with some friends, it is an awesome versus game. Easily one of the best from the 90s if you're into sort of one-on-one fighting game hybrid styles, which is basically what this is. It's a ton of fun to play, and some of the tactics might not seem so obvious, you know, when you're just watching it in a casual video like this, but once you really get down and you play it for a while and you start having matches with friends and people like that, or even just having fun with the single player mode. The single player is still fun. It's a bit of a challenge too if you've never played it before. But you can get into some really good matches in this game, and it's a ton of fun to play, guys. So now a sequel did come out, is Virtual On Oratorio Tangram or something like that. That was also an arcade game. It came out much later than this one, and it was eventually ported to the Dreamcast. And I do have that version. I'll eventually do a video on it. But it was also an excellent game. So if you have a Dreamcast and you want to check out the sequel, definitely check that out. The first Virtual On was also ported to PCs. It was a Windows 95 game, I believe, and it actually required the then new MMX technology. My computer at the time did not have that, so I couldn't get it, but I always wanted to try the PC version because I figured it would be even closer to an arcade perfect port than this one is. Now, the Sega Saturn is, you know, I'm pretty sure it's not quite as popular as Sega's own Model 1 arcade hardware, which I am pretty sure this game ran on. But it still did a great job at, you know, converting, or it was able to handle it. You know, there were some cutbacks, but the game still looks and plays great. The graphics are obviously dated by today's standards, and you might see a little clipping and so forth there, but the frame rate is very slick at all times. It doesn't really ever slow down, and you know, it just gets the job done, and you know, the game is just a lot of fun to play. So now there was also a third Virtual On game. It was called Virtual On Mars, and it was just for PlayStation 2. I don't believe it was ever an arcade game. I kind of stopped following the series, at least in the arcade realm, after Oratorio Tangram, but I did get Virtual On Mars for the PS2 when it came out, and I have to say I really didn't care for it all that much. They added missions and things like that, and added a whole legitimate quote-unquote single-player element, and it really strayed away from the sort of versus elements, and it really wasn't all that great in my opinion. Granted, I did not get very far in that game, but you know, maybe one of these days I will check it out again. But you really can't go wrong with the original two games, or even just the first one. If you've never played the series before, I would recommend starting off with the Saturn one, because I personally feel it's a little more accessible than the Dreamcast game, because the Saturn actually has two more face buttons than the Dreamcast does. It's able to handle the complex controls of the original dual-stick arcade game. The Dreamcast, it's a little bit trickier to turn because, well, you're missing two buttons. So you don't have individual turn left and turn right keys in the Dreamcast version. It gets it's tough. So if you've never played Virtual On before, any incarnation of it, I recommend trying the first one on the Sega Saturn, which you're seeing right here. It's not a very expensive game by any means. It's, I think for a normal copy, complete in box, you might be looking at about $15. It's not too bad. It's definitely worth that price, especially if you've got some friends around. It's absolutely worth it if you got some friends around that want to give this game a go and want to get used to it and learn it, and you know, it's great. So Not too expensive. The Dreamcast one isn't very expensive either, but I should probably stop talking about that one without showing footage of it. So, yeah, guys, that's basically it. There is also a Netlink edition of this game, which is actually what I'm using in my drive right now. I'm actually playing the Netlink version of this game and not the original version. But as far as I know, the Netlink edition is basically identical to the original game, except that if you have a Sega Netlink and it's plugged in when you turn the system on, it'll actually boot up to the Netlink screen where you can dial in an opponent, and it'll, you can play Virtual On over the Netlink. Now, only the actual Netlink edition of the game, which comes in a smaller jewel case, is compatible with the Netlink. So if you have a Netlink and you just have the original Virtual On, it's not going to work. But if you are ever curious to try that out, that's something you can do as well. And because the Netlink just uses straight phone lines and you directly dial your opponent, even though it's 2012 as I record this, you can still use it today. So that's also something else I'd like to try out again in the future. I used to play the Netlink stuff all the time when I was a kid in the 90s, but haven't done it in a really long time. So, alright guys, well that basically wraps it up. I could gloat about this game for a while. It's a fantastic game. It's a lot of fun to play. It might take a little while to get used to, but still, if you've got some time and you want to try to get the hang of it, it's well worth it. It's a lot of fun, especially once you get into the actual versus mode with a human being. And yeah, overall, the arcade version was translated really well to the Saturn, and the controller really gets the job done. It's very easy to play this game. Again, like I said, I don't feel it's as easy to play the Dreamcast version because there's less buttons on that controller. And if you really want to, be a purist about the original arcade game, you can also get twin sticks for the Sega Saturn that actually duplicate the original arcade controls. And as you boot up the game, it'll actually ask you if you're using a control pad or the twin stick. And the Dreamcast also has the twin sticks as well. So, but that's basically it, guys. As usual, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll be back with some new videos sometime soon. So until then, take care.